Hello?
Aaron,
Hello?
how are you?
Am I doing this right? Should I do it this way?
Do it that way.
Okay.
That Facebook was so difficult. I'm glad to
Very
finally see you, though.
nice to see you.
How are you in DC right now?
I am, or outside of DC, Silver Spring.
How is Aaron and Maisie?
They are very well, thank you. As
Um,
well as can be expected in this, in the new world.
yeah. What do you want to jump right in?
Happy to do whatever you would like to do. I am here for you.
Well, thank you for doing this.
Absolutely.
Um, why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about your creative journey to now?
The creative journey, it starts with my mom, Sharon Posner, who put me in every art class when I was a kid, right? Like, clay and painting and dance, which was a disaster until I took an acting class and did a couple of plays in elementary school and did that kind of stuff and sort of, but I wasn't focused on it, wasn't anything. Got to junior high school and all of my friends who were sort of the oddball kids started doing plays, so I started doing them too. They all got other interests and I never did. I found that this was for, deeply complex and probably really screwed up reasons, this is where I belonged. Um, I was a big reader, and so the idea that it was sort of stories come alive, that did a lot for me. And I loved the idea of sort of living in literature, felt pretty awesome. Um, so just did it all during high school, worked at the one professional theater in my town. This was in Eugene, Oregon.
That's right.
Whenever I could, did a backstage, on stage, whatever. When it was time to go to college, I looked for wherever was a really great theater program, went to Northwestern University, found what was then called the Department of Interpretation, which quickly became the Department of Performance Studies, which was the adaptation of literature for performance and the study of literature through performance. And I was home, and that was where I belonged. And I transferred out of the theater department into the performance and performance studies and followed Frank Galati around for a couple of years, who was a mentor and the most brilliant man. Um, and that started me on adaptation. Knew pretty quickly that I was always a fine actor. For high school I was great, but not so much. I wasn't the kind of actor I became most interested in, and thought that maybe directing was something more interesting to me in adaptation while I was in college. Um, Got out of college, went to a graduate school disastrously for a year, but met some really amazing people who changed my life. Um, Started a theater at 24 called the Arden Theater Company in Philadelphia with Terry Nolan and Amy Murphy, which is still going strong. Was the artistic director with Terry for 10 years there. Wrote a lot of plays, a lot of adaptations, directed a lot, learned a lot, ran a theater, and grew up a little bit. And left there after 10 years to freelance and teach, which I did. Became artistic director again at Two River Theater in Red Bank, New Jersey for 4 years from 2006 to 2010, and moved to Washington, D.C. in 2010 to freelance as a director and a playwright, along with my wife, Erin Weaver, fabulous actress, and my daughter now, Maisie. And that has been the 2 minute creative journey that has brought me to here.
I love that. How old is Maisie now?
Maisie's 8.
Oh my Lord.
She's
Wow.
the true. She's the creative genius. um, all the cliches about learning from your kid is are all fascinatingly true and totally enjoyable.
Is she acting?
Uh, is she acting? She has just been cast in her first play. That whether that play will ever happen or not is hard to say. But up at the Olney Theater Center in Pippin, Erin is playing Catherine in Pippin, and Maisie has been cast as Thea, her daughter. Um, in that production, so that will be her first professional production if and when it happens, which hopefully it will.
Wow. Um, well, how are you staying? What are you doing to stay creative? And do you feel any pressure to be creative?
I do feel the pressure. I am failing mostly, I would say right now. It's hard to, um, it's hard for me to stay focused, honestly, with everything that's going on. I'm finding focus is never an easy thing for me. I've had the nickname Captain Focus, ironically, for my lack of focus over the years when I'm directing. Um, so focus is never my strong suit, and focus right now is hard. I'm writing actually a screenplay right now. This is my first screenplay, and that is the big creative project I am lucky enough to have that I'm working on from home. So I am enjoying learning and sort of doing a crash course in screenwriting, and it's a great project, and so I'm doing that, and then preparing other things. I teach at American University, and I'm trying to learn to teach online, like so many people right now, and doing that, doing those things, and trying to stay creative and positive. And we are very lucky. We're doing okay here, and we're all healthy, and we're in a much better position than many. So feeling very lucky and trying to stay positive and focused.
Yeah. Is this the screenplay you were writing back like in the winter when we last spoke?
Yes, I was probably just starting on it then. Yes, and it's due relatively soon. So I am deep in it now.
You can't tell us anything about it, right?
I don't think so. I don't. It's an adaptation of a young adult novel that's great. Um, but I am. Yeah, but I think that's probably all I should say. But it's so similar and so different writing a screenplay from writing a play. A lot more rules, as I understand it. So I'm trying to learn the rules and be smart about it. It's new and fascinating, and it is truly a great challenge. I'm learning a ton.
No, you started acting and then found directing and producing. When did adapting and playwriting come into the mix?
Well, I never thought of myself as a playwright, even when I was doing adaptations. I really viewed the first 20, maybe, or at least 15 adaptations I did, which were all from novels or short stories. They were all prose fiction adaptations. Um, I really viewed those. I was writing plays, but I was sort of building plays or crafting plays. I was taking somebody else's brilliant creative work, Chaim Potok or Steve Lopez or Dostoevsky or Fitzgerald or Hemingway or Kay Gibbons, a lot of just brilliant authors. And I was midwifing their work of literature onto the stage, which was a creative and challenging and complicated act. But and I was creating a play out of it, but it was still somewhere. I didn't think of myself as a playwright, except when I was applying for playwriting fellowships, then I called myself a playwright. Other than that, I really thought I was this play maker, play builder, play crafter, however you want. Those all sound like terrible community theaters, but that's so. But play crafters, yeah, exactly. Um, but that's sort of the way I thought of it, and that really, for me, changed when I wrote "Stupid Fucking Bird" about 8 years ago, 9 years ago. And when I wrote that play, which was built from a play rather than a work of prose fiction, I wasn't trying to serve Chekhov, and it was much more personal, and I left the confines of the play in whole different ways. I finished that play, and at some point I was like, oh, I don't have to sort of make a joke or hide my head to call myself a playwright. I can call myself a playwright and feel like that's an appropriate title at this point. So I would say that's just been in the last decade that I've been, and all the plays that I've written in that time, which include Stupid Fucking Bird and Life Sucks and No Sisters, all of those Chekhovs. The Heel, which is my adaptation of Sophocles' Philoctetes, District Merchants, JQA, which is my play about John Quincy Adams, which is the play that is the first, even though it was using historical figures, that's my first non-adaptation from anything. That's my first sort of fully original play. All of those are plays that I wrote.
And if things get back to normal, JQA is going to be have a production at San Diego Rep.
Right, which I think is very exciting. So I think you might have had a hand in that. So thank you. Um, but very excited. It's getting it almost. We were very close to Lincoln Center was looking at it very seriously, and we did a reading up there. And there's some other places in New York that are looking at it. It's getting out there slowly. I'm very proud of it, and it's talking about the world right now in a lot of ways, actually. I mean, I think a lot of plays, the truth of any really difficult time. This was even true when I did Endgame 4 or 5, maybe 4 years ago, 2016, I think it was, or yeah. So, the world felt plenty hard then, and we kept finding all the resonances in Endgame. Um, lots. The harder things get, the more plays are necessary, and the more plays get all kinds of new and awful and wonderful resonances that hopefully you know uh, that take us to new places, that allows us to see new things. If the work, hopefully, if the work was telling the truth about things, then as the world shifts around it, new truths emerge from it. Is my always my hope.
Yeah. Is that sort of leads me to a question about why does theater matter in times like these?
Well, it's going to be fascinating, and I think, right, there are all the views, and as everything is still unfolding, no one knows. Um, Although I was on the board of the Philadelphia Fringe Festival and Live Arts Festival in 2001, on September 11th, and the festival was actually going on. And even after that, the energy of people wanting to be together, of wanting to come together in grief, in amazement, in difficulty, was palpable. And in the times afterwards too, I felt. So I think we all hope that the people will come running back to the theater, that when the people feel safe and comfortable, they will want communion together. They will want to be with like-minded people and different-minded people. They will want to be gathering to witness stories in a live arena. And therefore, and I'm sure it will, the plays are already being written, not
Mm.
about COVID-19, but about the feeling of these times and how this is changing our hearts and souls and minds. So those plays are already, my wife and I were just talking about that. Those plays are already in process. And even for the ones that are people who are writing anything right now, this will find its way into the work. It
Mm.
always does. So hopefully that will have new resonances, and hopefully the people come running back to us. That's the
Mm.
optimistic view. Um, and hopefully, all the forces will come together to make that possible. The theaters, hopefully the theaters will survive, and the artists will not move on to other professions, and and that we'll all continue the good work.
Can you reflect back at a time, maybe in this past year, that you were really proud of your work and talk about it?
Um, I'm uh, I'm putting more focus into teaching these days, and I love the work of a teacher. I am learning from my students how to be a teacher, how to be a better teacher. I've been teaching my whole career, but I have been always as an adjunct and always part-time, and I actually start full-time at American University in a tenure track position for next
Mm.
fall, which I'm really excited about. It's a wonderful department and wonderful people to work with, and the students are great. And um, and I'm really trying. I've had a lot of theories about acting and about plays and about writing plays and about that have all been tested out through the work to a certain extent. But I'm excited to sort of engage with more of the sort of pedagogy of how to formulate and formalize what I've been thinking and what I've been experimenting with as an artist. So I'm really proud of that work. Um, I think my work of late. I am trying to learn from many teachers that I've had. Um, many of them women who I've watched lead in ways that were not the way that I was taught to lead, leading from the front. If is kind of a way of thinking, is one way of thinking about it. But I watched friends of mine like Holly Twyford and Patty Gallagher and
Mm.
that find ways. Erica Chong Shook, a wonderful choreographer, California person.
Hmm.
Um,
Patty too.
yeah, Patty too. Who lead from the middle, who lead in the ensemble, who sometimes lead from the rear in an empowering kind of way, who don't have to put themselves at the front or the center of everything. And I'm trying to learn to do that more. And to the extent that I've been able to do that and evolve as a director and a leader in that direction, I think I'm most proud of that.
Mm.
I think
Um,
that's true.
Tara's teaching there, right?
Yeah, Tara, another one, and Tara and I are co-teaching right now, and she's another perfect example of that. You know, the students rally to Tara. Tara is an extraordinary teacher, and we actually don't get to watch each other all the time because sometimes we have a big class and we have to split it up. But I am trying to learn from her as well. It's a perfect example. Um, you know, there is a way young men. This is what we were shown, this is what we saw, this is what we was modeled for us, and that felt like, oh, that's being a good leader. Well, I'm slow to question that. I'm certainly not leading the battle to question those assumptions, but I am trying to learn to follow and to continue to grow. Um, you know, I'm my dad is a professor. He's retired now, but my dad was a professor for a long, long time. And I always wanted to be a professor and always wanted to be teaching full time, but was in a no hurry to get there. So I'm excited for the next phase of continuing to work professionally as both a playwright and a director still, but to really to continue to learn by teaching and hopefully pass some things on as well.
Mm. That's wonderful. For those watching, Tara uh, was in a show that I assisted Erin on, and now she has been dating Ro Body, who our audience is very familiar with for many years now, and we're going to interview them in a few weeks too.
Oh,
So
great! And Roe he was such a great con for you.
yeah,
I, you know, your production of Stupid Fucking Bird is still one of my favorite that I've ever seen, and he was so
oh,
fast at that.
that's very kind. You know, the last show I saw before all the shutdown was a production of Stupid Fucking Bird at San Diego State. It was a student production. It was very good. It was in the round.
Excellent,
It was very broken open in ways that I had not seen before. So
wonderful. That's
I think
great.
I'd be
I
happy with it.
Earlier today, I was taking Jefferson Farber was teaching a class where he teaches, who's an actor who used to be here, who's now teaching, and we just did it. And he's teaching a class all about Chekhov, and they read both Stupid Fucking Bird and Life Sucks. And so earlier today, I was just talking to that class. So it's in my brain.
Wow. Um, what? How do you think that theater will change once the doors open again, and how will this impact the work of future generations? That's a big question.
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? I wish I had the crystal ball. Um, I think it's a little bit what I was just saying before. Like I do think, you know, I do. We're all if the new normal is okay, we're all going to be really grateful, and we're all going to live. Um, I do try to live in gratitude. That is certainly a part of my life now, to live in gratitude for everything. And I think hopefully when we come out of this, we will all be living in gratitude for what we have and what we're able to do. You know, it's always I've been so aware for so long. You know, I mean, like the as challenging as it can be to live in the world of regional theater and sort of in an environment of scarcity and never enough resources and not quite the kind of attention you might want to garner, whatever it is, it's still unquestionable that the kind of privilege that we have to spend our lives making art and trying to share stories that matter to us and that we think might matter to other people is just such an incredible gift. And and I do think it's a gift worth giving. I don't think it's a selfish gift. I think it's a gift that people do want. I always, you know, and I do think people will. I think there is such an intrinsically different energy to sitting in a room of people with something happening live in front of them, and And when people have to spend this as much time as they're going to spend in the next several months watching a lot of screens and a lot of people doing great work, it's handy that TV has never been better, and there's certainly plenty of great things to watch. But I think many people, and hopefully younger people, will yearn for, like, I want to be back with the people. I want to be in the world with folks. I want to be engaging in that way. And I think this is the way theater has been going anyway, right? Whether it's devised work, or whether it's site specific and immersive, or whether it's plays like mine that are just fourth wall breaking all the time, or whatever it is. Since the theater is moving towards more interactive, more engagement, more immediacy, I think this might encourage that even more, which I think would all be a good thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I've noticed that too, teaching, directing to a younger generation, that they have no interest in conventional theatrical spaces, which at first I was resistant to, because
right,
I like that
yeah.
box, but it is what everyone else is interested in.
Although things will always come, things will always come back around and around and around, won't they? Because people always move away. I mean, in my view anyway, people always move away from story, right? There's story. There's the core caveman sitting around a fire telling a good damn story. And then it moves off into other kinds of images and other kinds of storytelling. But it tends to come back around. And eventually, it's like when I did this production of The Tempest that I co-directed with Teller, and we did it in a tent in front of the Performing Arts Center in Las Vegas. And it was so exciting to be in such a new kind of space. We're outside in this tent, but there's airplanes and there's cars and there's running clubs that go running by. And we're thinking, like, this tent is great, but wouldn't it be great if we could find some kind of space where the walls were solid? And maybe where there was plumbing and some way you could control the temperature. Like, we reimagined the need for a theater. And I think it's sometimes after a certain time that you're doing site-specific things and you're in some warehouse and it's like, well, wait a second. Wouldn't it be cool if everyone was looking at the same picture at the same time? If we could put some kind of frame around it,
Yeah.
So, I think, but it's wonderful that those cycles keep happening, that you move away from it, and then of course only when you've moved away from it do you find what's intrinsically worthy in it and valuable, and hopefully you come back and now it's richer and reimagined.
Aaron, there's a wonderful story about your Tempest that I love telling sometimes. It's when you were sitting down with Teller and you were trying to put down lists of, like, people to write the music, and you came with your list and he came with his, and his list was.
Yeah, my list was excellent. We're excellent people, excellent regional theater composers, and his list was, let's see, what was it? It was Lou Reed, Stephen Sondheim, and Tom Waits. Uh, and I was like, oh,
We'll
yeah,
go with those.
those guys are good. We could explore those guys. Yeah, our lists were a little different.
um, are you remounting that show soon?
Yeah, we are. That's the plan. Again, who knows what the world is, but Roundhouse Theater here in DC, which it's never been in DC, so that's really exciting. So Roundhouse in the fall will be doing that production of Tempest again here in DC, and it'll be really exciting to get to share it with local audiences.
Amazing. Um, can you? This is one of my questions for you. Can you make, just in solidarity, can you make three we statements about yourself and other artists right now?
We need to be resilient. We need to find that balance of taking what we do absolutely seriously and not too seriously, and yet absolutely seriously, but not, you know what I mean, in that cycle, and value what we do for its true and deep and complicated value, and yet know that there are other values and higher values and harder values that need to be valued as well, and things that need to be valued as well. Um, we probably we, the producer, director, writer people, probably need to follow the dictates that we impose upon our actors: courage, generosity, and a willingness to raise the stakes, you know, to be specific, those same things that we ask because it
Mhm.
makes for better stories, and we ask our actors to do so selflessly and so courageously and so generously. We're all going to need to be in that way of being, um, because flexibility and inclusivity and non-graspingness, because it's uh, even if things come out of this great, which is of course a huge question mark, they won't be unchanged and they won't be easy for a while.
Mhm.
You know, maybe a long while, maybe I mean, who knows? I don't pretend to have any particular understanding, but it's not going to be easy no matter what. And how we you know, this is, I've just been reading about this, and this is, you know, so I've been thinking a lot about abundance and scarcity, and
Mhm.
uh, always a tricky balance in the theater because we do live in an environment of scarcity all the time. But you're better. We're better people and better artists when we can try to work from abundance. When we can try, and if it's not an actual abundance, it's an abundance of generosity or an abundance of hope or an abundance. And if we can, to use one of my wife's favorite phrases, hold on tightly and let go lightly, and share
Mhm.
the abundance that we have as well as we can with all the people. You know, it makes what Ars Nova just, did you read about Ars Nova? Um, you know, who is continuing to pay all of their people, everyone they've committed to, all the way through the time. And of course, not everyone is in a position to do that. You don't want to sort of shame anyone who can't. But Renee Blinkwell, the managing director there, was another California. We worked together at Shakespeare Santa Cruz a dozen years ago when she was an assistant director, and she's just a remarkable leader. And I read about what they were doing there, and just was like in such admiration of their generosity and courage to take that leap.
Mhm. My final question is, if you could invite anyone in the world to dinner, who would it be?
Yeah, you know, this is always a hard one, but I'm probably going to have to say Shaw.
Mm.
Now, if I could have three, I would probably, and even though I am very aware that they're all dead white guys, you know, it's probably Shakespeare, Shaw, and Chekhov, just because I wonder how they did what they did. But in these times, Shaw probably comes out on top, because if Shakespeare was the great poet and great innovator, and Chekhov was the great realist, Shaw was still the one so far ahead of his time with a vision of the world and politics and humanity that
Mm.
was so much more clear-sighted than kind of anyone. I would somehow like to know how he did that, how those eyes worked, how did he see what he saw, and how could he see so much more clearly than so many people, to the point that he is still radical 150 years later, 120 years later, you know. Um, so and also, you know, we're mostly vegan and vegetarian, and so is he. So maybe it would be easier to have him to dinner here. Maybe he liked what we cook. Um, uh,
Do
I'm
you have
not
a Do you have a favorite Do you have a favorite Shaw play?
Yeah, Man and Superman is that would be my default answer. I think it's just got a lot, that
Yeah.
play, and so smart and so human and so true and so, and also inspiring and also controversial and still, and a little shot if you really get at what it's, but Major Barbara too. I mean, I love them all. You know, that's
Yeah.
my I would spend a lot more time doing Shaw Shaw's not in these days so much, but so it's not being done as much. But I think it should be, and just love every time I get to be around his brain, because I find it's so inspiring and so you know, it's the spectacular, uh, this thing that I stumbled into by going to Northwestern and finding Frank Galati in that department there. This chance to always be to be working in your own work, but always with this incredible genius in the room with you, whether that's Shakespeare or Shaw or Chekhov, or Kay Gibbons or, you know, Hemingway or whoever this. But when you're adapting literature, great literature, um, you get to be in conversation with these people who you don't actually get to be in conversation with. Um, you know, when I got to adapt Chaim Potok's work, and I actually got to be in conversation with Chaim, but I was also in a really meaningful conversation, because, you know, there was when you've read The Chosen 20 times,
Mhm.
you've probably read that book more. Maybe I'd read that book more than any other person has ever read that book. You know, I mean, when you're adapting a piece of literature that way, you get to talk, and if you even get to talk to the author, you're talking to someone where you're like, I have read your work as deeply as anyone, you know,
Mhm.
or as deeply as I know how to. So it's that's another of the great privileges, is just getting to work with getting to work with, whether you really are or not, these tremendous thinkers and tremendous authors and artists.
Yeah. Um, do our viewers have any questions for Aaron? Now's the time to ask. While we're waiting, Aaron, would you some a phrase I love that you say as a director, but you also put it in your work, is actually, and
Yeah.
would you talk about what that means?
Sure. I'm actually going to teach a class, I believe, next year at American University, to which the title of the class will be Actually. And I've called it, I'm thinking of it as a class about acting rather than an acting class. And because it's about authenticity, you know, that behind the Chekhov adaptations was, and part of my dislike for a fourth wall is that on some level in the world now, a fourth wall feels kind of inherently dishonest. Not, I don't want to get attacked by the Arthur Miller lovers, who I have so much respect for. Some of the great authors of all time have written fourth wall realism and done it brilliantly, and there's not that doesn't invalidate that work, but there is something slightly dishonest to me about not saying, oh, by the way, we all know we're in a play, we're all in a room here together, and this is happening right here, right now. Can we just be clear about that? And the logical progression of that is, um, this idea of, like, I am interested in our messy humanity. Maybe this is what ties me to Chekhov. Um, Messy, messed up, complicated, unhelpful, often unhealthy, but raw and loving and hopeful humanity. And I want to see that in the work. I want to see that in, when I'm a director, when I try and do that to the best of my ability as an author. I try and create an environment that allows that to happen in the room as a director. I try and encourage that and even demand it from my students when I'm teaching, to say, where are you in this? Where is, where is, I had the great good fortune of working with John Hirsch, who was he was a spectacular teacher. I hear he was often a raging asshole as a person and as a director. But I assistant directed a production of Midsummer Night's Dream with him when I was very briefly a grad student at SMU in 1980 something, and he was this remarkable man, Hungarian Jew, who'd been in Auschwitz when he was a child and escaped and started the Manitoba Theater Center at 18. And he was just an incredible, incredible human being. But he would rail about, if you show me a Hermia or a Helena, I've directed the play a dozen times. How could I possibly be interested? But if you'll show me your Hermia or your Helena or your Puck that nobody else can do except you, I am yours. And he changed my life. He was for all the brilliant people I worked with, another guy, Ron Ayer, who I talk about all the time, and Frank Galati, and many, many others who I have learned from, so many actors and designers and directors that I've learned from over the years. John was the one who, that idea alone was like, oh, that's what I believe too. That's what interests me. Where is the beating soul of your Hamlet, that even though the play's been done 100 gazillion times, and that's an exact number, 100 gazillion, if you will still show me what makes your understanding of it unique and complicated and truthful and you, I will be interested in Hamlet yet again. And if you show me a generic Hamlet, oh my God, how could I possibly care? So that's, to me, and all the ways in which there's a million traps that allow us to not be actually, um, and a million reasons why we protect ourselves. Sometimes, some of them good reasons. You know, how you protect yourself from the work, because actually going there is really hard and demanding and complicated to do. Um, but I think it's what, some version of that is what makes performances exceptional and allows us to connect on a different kind of level.
We have a few questions that came through. One is, what inspired you to do these subversions of Chekhov?
Subversions.
Or
Um,
how do you describe them?
I love Chekhov, and yet what was once radical, by the time it was my time, we're now old hat, imitated by everybody for over 100 years. Um, they're brilliant, but they're distant. And I think I had some desire to borrow the brilliance and use it as a launching pad for my own, to say what I wanted to talk about in the theater and to share things about my own life. So I lovingly, I hope, borrowed this platform, this playground from Chekhov to say, I love what I'm not creative enough to come up with my own universe or my own playground. So I'll borrow yours as a springboard, hopefully, and sort of bounce into mine. And that was and that freed me and opened up a world for me. I have spent my career standing on the shoulders or holding on to the back of these geniuses, and this was another way of doing that. But I also I'm a passionate believer in reimagination. Like, that ideas and ways of working are passed forward, and I think that's a great thing to do, to constantly be a reimagining plays and reimagining stories and variations and variations and variations. I just read this great play, The Pliant Girls by Megan Brown, who it's her adaptation of The Suppliant Women of the first play, which, Big Love, brilliant play by Chuck Mee, adaptation of The Suppliant Women. Well, she's gone and done it again. It is an adaptation of the same play, but has nothing to do with Big Love, except it kind of does, but it doesn't at all, because it's filtered through her sensibility. This was the wonderful conversation that her name, that Haley Pfeiffer and I had when we talked about when she had done Moscow, 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 and I was doing No Sisters, and we were talking about or it was when Life Sucks was in New York, and so both of those were in New York at the same time, and you to meet Haley, who I had never met before, and I had been watching her play, I'm like, oh yeah, this is obviously your play, and if you see Life Sucks and you meet me, you go, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's my play, they're deeply attached to who we are, and yet they're still in conversation with the original, and I think that's a great process.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or tricks for writer's block?
No. I mean, I don't think so. I've never been one of those disciplined writers. I write every day between so and so and so and so, and I have a process or a way. Um, I don't know that. So, I have mostly written from my own dysfunction, my own psychology, my own complexity. And when you're writing who you are and putting that into the world, on some level, it has mostly flown and flowed out of me. Um, I'm writing now some things like the screenplay that are starting from outside of me and are not as personal to me, and so it's more it's work. Although that's what I'm trying to teach my daughter now too, right? Like, just because you're good at some things, you doesn't mean you're good at everything, and it's not about necessarily being the most talented or having it come easy to you. It's about, oh, here now, sometimes it's flow and sometimes it's a pleasure, and sometimes there's a couple of scenes in some of those plays that I wrote. One of my favorite scenes is Stupid Fucking Bird. I wrote on a lunch break. I was a sort of like, oh, we should have a scene between the two of you, and that was the scene between Mosh and Nina. I
Oh,
wrote for those two actresses during scenes,
me
but
too.
sometimes that happens, and you're really lucky when that does. But a lot of the time it's just work, and you sit down and you work some more, and the next day you work some more, and then and hopefully it gets you someplace.
Hmm. That scene, Aaron, young actors love that scene. I give it to young actors, and I mean, you wrote their language so easily.
Yeah.
Sorry for all the things.
All well, like many of my in quotes, my best ideas, they're my wife's, and that phrase is my wife's too. Her phrase was all the things, which I have borrowed, as is Cowsy Dotes, which is in Stupid Fucking Bird, and a number. There's many, many, many parts of my wife are in all of my work. Um, but yeah, that scene, Katie DeBuise and Kimberly Gilbert, who I had worked with them both on Vibrator Play, which was the play I was working on when I started writing Stupid Fucking Bird, and where the genesis of it happened. And and they were just saying during lunch break, "Oh yeah, we don't have a scene together." I was like, "No, really, nothing together?" They were like, "No." I was like, "Okay." And by the time we were done with lunch, I had that scene.
What this is an interesting question. Looking at adapting history, JQA, how is it the same or different from adapting a literary product?
Harder,
Mm,
um, but the same. Harder because it's not late because it's not laid out for you dramatically because you don't have a sort of brilliant structure from which to vary. I created a structure of my own. Um, but similarly inspiring in that you have these real stories and these real people and these sort of qualities that you have to bounce off of. I mean, I've always, I still, even though I wrote JQA from scratch, I've still never sat down and gone, okay, there's a guy named Bob. Like there's like I'm just going to start from absolutely nothing, and I'm just going to weave a story out of nowhere. And of course, so many great playwrights do that, and I am in, you know, I'm in such admiration of their capacity to just pull wholesale from nothing out of these acts of imagination. I mean, I'm sure this is hopefully we find our way of working if we're lucky. And for me, this is why finding adaptation. I was never one of those guys. I loved the reading. I loved being in other people's worlds. I love reimagining. I love that process. I am not one of those like just find the story out of no place and start writing and create and craft. You know, um, you know, just not who I am.
mm. This might be the final question. What is your take on theater being created in different regions of the country? And do you have a favorite place to experience theater and why?
Well, I have many favorite theaters, and I've been blessed to work at a lot of theaters, and whenever I work someplace, I used to travel around and work a lot. Mostly, I stay in DC now because of family. Um, but I would always try and see as many shows there as I possibly could, and sort of see who the audience is. I love the idea of being able to create for an audience for a particular location,
Mm,
knowing that you would do this play probably similarly if I was doing it in one location or another. I'm not going to sort of, my vision of Endgame, for instance, isn't going to be so radically different if I did it in San Diego than if I did it in DC, but it will be different. It will be, and depending on the size of the venue and what the organization is interested in, and who the audience is. Doing Shakespeare at the Folger, which is I've done 20 shows at the Folger Shakespeare Library and there, the Folger Theater there, over the many, many years. And it's a very sophisticated theater audience, a brilliant audience. And I've done some of my best work for knowing their audience and engaging with them in a certain way. But that's so different than the way people come and watch shows at Cal Shakes, a brilliant, wonderful theater. Um, I felt, Robbie, I felt what you did in engaging with your audience at Stupid Fucking Bird, the way you framed that play for your audience in that space, felt like it had such integrity to who your audience was and the way they were ready to engage with your actors and with the space that you were in. That was one of the things that impressed me the most, was sort of an integrity of time and space of that production in that theater. You working with close collaborators of yours. I have a lot of respect for that. Um, the Folger is a favorite theater. Maybe my favorite place to see theater, to do theater anywhere, is the American Players Theater in Spring Green, Wisconsin.
Oh
One of
yeah.
the one of the gems that is not as well known in the American theater. A 1,000-seat outdoor amphitheater in the middle of rural Wisconsin, where brilliant actors and a truly engaged audience that has full ownership of that place um, come together to share these stories, classics, night after night over this, for several months each year. There's something about that place that, I don't know, it speaks to sort of Greek roots and like, true engagement with a community over a long period of time. That was also what I grew up seeing at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival when I was young, growing up in Oregon. Um, and I think what Oregon does so well too is, these theaters with deep roots in communities where the community grows up with that theater. There's something very, very special about that.
Mhm. Is there anything else you want to say to us before we sign off?
I've done anything quite like this before. I'm thrilled that people had questions, which means people were actually, which is delightful and excellent. And this was fun to do. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Tomorrow, I'm going to interview playwright actor Kate Hamill and her husband Jason O'Connell, and hopefully I'll figure out what the
Oh,
best forum is for this. But Aaron, it's always a delight to with
talk
you.
about two outstanding, talk about two outstanding artists. That's very exciting. I'll have to listen in.
Yeah, and Aaron, I hope we can do something soon together.
I hope so too.
Miss you, friend. Give your family my love.
Thanks. Talk to you soon, pal.